See, I guess it's slow typing. Maybe I should have shut my door. Oh well. So, let's finish those last few slides of black political thought so we can talk about what's going to be on the midterm. For those of you that have to take the midterm, I am still putting it up on Blackboard. You'll have from Thursday through Saturday to take the exam. Once you open the exam, you'll have 12 days, not 12 days, 12 hours to take it. I extended both the time window and then your allotted time to take it because, of course, we all are in various places across the country, and I wanted to make sure everybody had enough time to access the exam as well as take the exam. And so after we finished the last 3 parts of Black Political Thought, which was part 2, I know it still says part 1, but just never got around to adding there was nothing more I wanted to add for part 2. So after we finish that, we'll do a review. I guess the last thing I'll ask is Animal Crossing like online play? I've just been playing a lot of RPGs. I've been sleeping a lot. That's what I've really been doing. All the best sleep. It was great. I watched Kingdom on Netflix. It's like ancient Chinese version of The Walking Dead, which, given the circumstances of today, I think it was fitting to watch. Let's see, I watched Castlevania Season 3. I've watched Beastars. I started watching Vampires. You'll see there's like a thread here. I do a lot of supernatural stuff. But then eventually I'm going to get back to my games. It's going to be great. Be sure to take walks if you're able to. Take walks. For those of you that'll be streaming this or replaying this video, watch this in like 10-15 minute clips. For the most part, outside of the midterm and the final exam, there's nothing left for this class unless you're taking the writing credit, and if so, y'all still got those essays to do, that sucks. Same thing for independent study. Turn in those 5 essays so we can just keep it moving. End of the semester is literally almost here. So let's get into it. We can talk about what's going to be on the midterm exam. So, of course, if you recall what we did before spring break, the beginning of the month seemed like such a long time ago. Like the beginning of the month, still cracking jokes. What is this coronavirus? The Wuhan virus? And now look at us. Time moves swiftly, doesn't it? The game changes really quickly. Anyway, of course, recall that Black political thought refers to the attempt to develop a set of critical tools to help explain the political distinctiveness of Black life worlds, and how this distinctiveness is, of course, structured by a series of relations between the individual and the community, the self and other, the state and society, the citizen and the non-citizen, and then, of course, the national or multinational and the global scene. See, go back. Do I really not have all the questions up here? Guess not. Oh well. Oh yeah. The questions that ultimately Black political thought aim to answer are: how is Blacks' position in society explained? What are the specific roles for race, class, and gender? Who or what is the enemy? Who are friends with whom? And who is one willing to form coalitions? What attributions are made about the nature of American society and the other state? What is the nature of whites? To what degree, if any, of tactical or strategic separation from whites is desirable or necessary? And then finally, what stance should Blacks take towards the American creed, American liberalism, and American liberal ideology? And then, of course, there was a video, but as I said before, I learned the hard way that, we can't watch videos. And so, of course, for some of you, I want to say Dylan was here for this too, we tried to make our own Black political ideology in class for ourselves. Let's see, we said that the problems or what the problems that African Americans face today. We said it was like systemic oppression and racism. We asked in terms of who or what is the enemy. We said white supremacy, ourselves, the government, perhaps economic access, healthcare, prisons, the education system. In terms of who are our friends or whom are we willing to form coalitions with, you all said anyone willing to lend a hand. They have to have genuine concern and authentic intentions. And of course, anyone we want to be friends with or whatever, it varies based on the situation or context. Gotta say, as we get fewer, more and more weeks away, I gotta realize a lot of this is mad vague. I should have pushed y'all to give more concrete answers. Anyways, in terms of saying like what attributions can be made about American society and the state, you all said that society is changing, but it's not in a linear fashion. In terms of saying what was the nature of whites, said overall they can be problematic and prejudicial against people of color. And then there was an attempt to break down the white group based on SES, and so for poor and hardworking whites, said they were hardworking and individualistic. Said that for for white middle class, said they were politically malleable, and then really didn't get to identify or describe the white working class. In terms of describing the degree of separation from whites that is desirable or necessary, just said instead there needs to be a creation and maintenance of social racial spaces, and then as well as an opportunity or a choice to engage in de facto segregation. Let's see, and then in describing ultimately what is the American dream for African Americans, there was happiness, success, 40 acres and a mule, survival, and what was the last one? No fear, and then the ability to go to church. I guess. Yeah. And so, of course, to recall, under Black political thought, that officially, from Dawson's Black Visions, which I do hope y'all read, that was the only other textbook we had for this course. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 if we don't look at Dawson. 1, 2, 3, 4 schools of political thought. That would be Black liberalism, Marxism, feminism, and nationalism. However, under Black Visions by Dawson, really what there's going on, it's not 4, it's 6 schools of thought. It's just that 3 of them are housed under the same umbrella, and that umbrella is Black liberalism. And so when we talk about these Black schools of thought, this is what we're going to be talking about. Before spring break, we really got into the 3 schools of thought that existed under Black liberalism, and those are Black conservatism, radical egalitarianism, and disillusioned liberalism. And so, of course, we really don't have to go too much into the first 3 schools of thought. There's radical egalitarianism, where most people, that's not most people, no, most people don't identify with that. Of ultimately the goals of radical egalitarianism, you can always just replay this video back and see all these words on the screen. That's the beauty of YouTube. Isn't that beautiful? And then, of course, disillusioned liberalism. Most African Americans identify with disillusioned liberalism. I should have gave the numbers like I did before. Going back to, actually it's not on this version. But it is upwards of 40% of the Black community identify with disillusioned liberalism. And then, of course, the most controversial and smallest amount of the Black community that believes in Black conservatism, this is the ideology for that. Of course, one of the big ideologues for this school of thought is, of course, Booker T. Washington. I still contend that Dawson argues that it's less than 1% of African Americans actually believe in Black conservatism. I think it's more than that. But that's a project for me to do after tenure, to actually figure out the political ideologies within the Black community. But then again, at the same time, that's not really my shtick anymore. But just sitting down and trying to poll it, measure it, it's still something I wouldn't mind doing. And then it's ultimately not everybody, regardless of race or whatever, 100% sticks to one political ideology or another, especially when we think about the masses as a whole, have low to moderate levels of political sophistication. And of course, political sophistication increases with education, big one, as well as varies based on occupation. So the ability to adhere solely to one political ideology or another is directly linked to political sophistication, political knowledge, etc. So with that in mind, tying it back to the black community, we don't see 100% radical egalitarianists. We don't see like 100% disillusioned liberalists, not 100% black Marxists. We will likely see a lot of 100% black feminists. Why is that? We'll talk about that in a few slides. So, of course, then we talked about whether or not y'all actually agree with Dawson. Do these political ideologies actually exist in the black community? And then I asked everyone, were there similar schools of political thought in American politics? Is there a Latino political thought? Is there an Asian political thought? And if so, what does it look like? And so let's get into the rest of the section, right? So those last 3 slides. Of course, let's talk about black Marxism. And so all black Marxism it's just a political ideology in which race, spirituality, and self-determination address the issues of the land as essential to U.S. dynamics. It insists that there are critical differences in the interests between the black middle class and the less affluent blacks. And so, like, if you're not the black middle class, then what are you? Are you poor? No, it's the less affluent. Anyways, and ultimately those class divisions within the black community make black elites and the black middle class unreliable allies in the search for social and economic justice. Under black Marxism, the biggest focus ultimately is control of the economy by African Americans. To do so would mean that the wealth of all Americans would be shared with blacks equally. Ultimately, under this school of thought, the economically depressed is the focus of their agenda, and ultimately the constant theme of the ideology is the belief that capitalism is systematically disadvantaged and exploits black people. It disadvantages workers and, of course, disadvantages the poor. Black Marxism proposes united tactics in which the progressive classes and those within the black community work with progressive movements and forces outside of the black community. And so ultimately what's going on here is black Marxists have strong ideological differences with black nationalists. In fact, black Marxists argue that black nationalists are backwards. Ultimately, so what Dawson does later on in Black Visions is really goes into how do we come to understand black Marxism and exactly like who are the forefathers of it. We know that, strongly influenced by the ideologies of Du Bois, James, and Richard White. However, black Marxism as a school of thought studied within the discipline of political science, we can give that to, or actually give thanks to, one Cedric Robinson. He is the one that coined black Marxism as an academic subfield of study. Robinson argues that under black Marxism is the existence of a black radical tradition, which is ultimately in opposition to traditional Marxism, which can be at times read as simply being in opposition to being black or being Marxist. He argues that this black radical tradition is characterized by a desire to recreate an African culture with focus on self-consciousness over material reality, as well as rejecting approaches based on the abstract understanding of overthrowing a system. And instead, it's more characterized by a flight from the system. For Robinson in particular, it's highlighted by widespread practice of slaves known as maroonage. Yeah, that's right. That is the escape from slavery and ultimately setting up alternative societies based on African culture from which they were torn. In contrast, Marx is oftentimes portrayed as a essentially or fundamentally Eurocentric thinker. In terms of thinking about black Marxism in the modern day, let's see, it's more so not as militant, and it's more pragmatic, and it's a less pure version of a black social democracy. One of the current day proponents of black Marxism is one Cornel West, who argued that it seems to me that to be a socialist, if anything, is to keep track of wasted energies, the spiritual sterility, and the exhausted potential left by the rule of capital. And of course, that's that set of interlocking elites, banks, corporations, and political elites. Since the 80s, black Marxism has been declining in influence, and it has lost much of its institutional support. And so, similar to black feminism, pockets of black Marxism really only exist within academia. So, what about that other school of thought that hangs out in academia? Black feminism. Woo! We'll talk more about that if we talk about black women politics, which reminds me, you want that essay assignment, that essay grade, that last or extra, because this is considered extra credit. Fill out that survey on the Blackboard page. Tell me how you want us to spend the rest of the semester. What should we be studying for the rest of the semester? Once I find out that, I will let everybody know. If everyone fills it out sooner rather than later, for 1AG, just email me and tell me what you would like to do, so that way your voice can be counted too. And then I'll get back to everybody, and we will all know what we should be reading. Let's see. Did I tell you all I uploaded chapter summaries? The introduction and conclusions and summaries for every chapter for Walton and Smith. That is also on Blackboard. You're welcome. So that way, even if you did leave your books on campus and you couldn't get them before campus shut down, you can keep up with the readings. And of course, those additional readings that were not from Black Visions or from the textbook, those are already up there. So there's really no reason for you to fall behind on your readings. Keep up with that. Anyways, back to the lecture at hand for our new people. Now we have 8 people watching. Hey, y'all. If y'all want to talk or have your voice heard, you can just click the Zoom link in the chat if it shows up. That's how, if you want to have your voice heard and you want to participate that way. Otherwise, we'll just keep doing the live chat. I'll keep checking it. Anyways, back to black feminism. Whoop-de-whoop. So, of course, black feminism argues that sexism, class oppression, and racism are inextricably bound together. This study, coined by one Kimberly Crenshaw back in 1989, is intersectionality. That is the study of intersections between forms of or systems of oppression, domination, and discrimination. If I recall correctly, Professor Paul Dean said that Kimberly Crenshaw was her dissertation, his dissertation chair, or was on his dissertation committee. So that's kind of cool that Paul Dean worked with Kimberly Crenshaw and was influential in his dissertation. Let's see. Black feminism holds that the experience of black women gives rise to a particular understanding of their position in relation to sexism, class oppression, and racism. Why won't that go away? Let's see. The experience of being a black woman cannot be grasped in terms of just solely being black or looking at just being black or just being a woman, but it has to be looked at with the looked at the intersection. So anybody and everybody is just not one identity. Everybody's multiple identities. I'm not just black. I'm also a woman. I'm a black woman. I'm a professor. I'm still young. I am sleepy. I am tired. So you have to look at I know that's kind of petty and pretty trivial, but at the intersection of sleepy and hungry, yeah, that's where I am. I haven't had no nap time today. Anyways, black feminism conceptualizes the struggle of justice as a fight to be fought on many fronts. Black feminists argue that the struggle for justice is not only a struggle for black women, it's also a struggle for all oppressed groups, including the poor, minorities, gays, lesbians, and others. Black feminists place community at the heart of their struggle, and consequently it's been long skeptical of the American creed of the autonomous individual as well as separation of public and private spheres. Ultimately, this school of thought, black feminism, is not really maintained or promoted by the black press or by a large or black informational networks. Black feminism really, it gets its bread and butter. It lives within the academic world. Let's see. So some of the things that they argue is African Americans living in neighborhoods with concentrated poverty are less likely to support black feminism, and this is a result of the social isolation that comes with poverty. Unlike black nationalism, black feminism is not maintained and diffused by the press or informational networks. Black feminists for the longest time have had tense relationships with black nationalists. They're not comfortable with black nationalists' insistence on a single black agenda, nor are they comfortable with the assumption that concerns black women so black nationalists argue that black women should be subordinate in the interests of black solidarity. There's that too. When we think about products of the black feminism movement or the black feminist school of thought, not only is it intersectionality, we also have Me Too, the Me Too movement. That was started by a black feminist. Black Lives Matter, that is also a product of black feminism. So all of these hashtag movements, except All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, those are not the products of black feminists, but the ones that we're thinking about that uplift or actually draw awareness to the sexual harassment and assault of women and men, drawing into questions, what do we come to understand about consent, as well as drawing attention to the unfair abuse, marginalization, and destruction of black bodies by the police state. Those are products of black feminism. I clicked tab already. All right, so what about that nationalism? So I did have a video. If you want to look for it, it was called, so if you want, because I told you I can't play videos. Otherwise, YouTube will shut down the stream and cancel class once again. We don't want that to happen. You could just search in your YouTube bar, Black Nationalist. I believe it belongs to, let's see, can I find it again? Black Nationalist video. Yeah, it belongs to All Things Harlem. Video's like 7 years old. It shows black nationalists at the 50th anniversary of the Martin Luther King Jr. March. And it just shows like not necessarily what they look like, but really just an expression from a black nationalist himself expressing exactly what are the goals of the school of thought, what are the major tenets, etc. But going back to the lecture in question, black nationalism, Black nationalism is the political ideology in which the ultimate goal is to create an autonomous black nation state with definite geographical boundaries. It's also known, depending upon where you are, Afrocentrism or Pan-Africanism. Let's see. Under black nationalism, race is seen as the fundamental category for analyzing society, and America ultimately is seen as racist. So let's see. Where was I? Do I have any more notifications? Nope. Okay. So under black nationalists, black nationalists view alliances with others with suspicion. They believe that the nation is conceived as a primordial group bound together with ties as strong as those that bind a family. Black nationalists believe the interests of blacks and whites are fundamentally opposed. Black nationalism has a strong foundation in the community media as well as within black organizational networks. Black nationalist views appear in the artistic products of people such as Public Enemy and Sister Souljah and Clan X. Black nationalist thought most strongly structures black opinion. So we have black opinion. So black nationalist influences the expression of black public opinion. Meanwhile, disillusioned liberalism is the largest identified, or not identified, is most likely widely identified within the black community. Told you 40% express some form or identify with disillusioned liberalism. However, black nationalist thought structures expressed black opinion. And then finally, black nationalism provides the most consistent challenge to the liberal hegemony within the black community. When we think about black nationalism, it's typified by the works and experiences of Martin Delany, Marcus Garvey, and Malcolm X. Its ideological starting point is its support for African American autonomy and self-determination. Let's see. As I said before, its race is seen as a fundamental category for analyzing society, and America is viewed as fundamentally racist. And I said within the racialized view, alliances with others are seen with suspicion. Let's see. Was there anything else? The degree of separation is supported by black nationalists varies considerably. And of course, this separation can be cultural, social, economic, or political. Back in the 19th century, when we're talking about why is Martin Delany considered one of the forefathers of black nationalism, it was because Delany had a vision of a black nation, and that, of course, embodied the idea of a separate state within America. But this idea is still promoted by members of the community today. Let's see. Modern day black nationalists that promote a form of separation today it's primarily the Nation of Islam. They have pursued efforts to build food co-ops, bookstores, restaurants, and other small businesses to promote self-autonomy within the black community. Let's see. Dawson argues that black nationalism provides the most consistent challenge to liberal hegemony within the black community. Apparently, Dawson argues that black nationalism has the strongest presence in black communities and a number of black campuses, so HBCUs, and most strongly structures opinion. Oh yeah, so yeah, that's the remaining three. So yay, that's the remaining three. If you give me a second, I can pull up the midterm review, like everything that you need to have for the midterm. So, gosh, I wonder if there's a way I could like make it a black screen. Otherwise, do I just have to like Oh well. Oh well. We'll figure this out. It shouldn't be that bad. Y'all bear with me for a moment while I pull up the midterm review. Because I thought I had it up and turns out I didn't. Y'all just gonna be like, oh, Dr. Max stuff is everywhere. I know, why can't I turn it off? Because I don't know how to use things. Because if I stop it, that should do. Will you open? And then let's see. New share. All right. So, on the midterm, that will happen Thursday through Saturday. Here are the terms that you need to study, that you need to be aware of. You need to know what black politics is. So go back, check your notes, look at that, as well as those frames of reference. You need to go in and review the section that when we talk about the black agenda. Why is it problematic? Go back and review those 3 types of representations: symbolic, substantive, and descriptive. Gerrymandering, the 3 types of gerrymandering: cracking, stacking, and packing. Go back in and review Walton and Smith's typology of racial attitudes, as well as policy perspectives of American presidents. Those 3 phases of black leadership when we watched Street Fight, that was fun. Go back and look at the typology of phase 3 leaders. That should also be on Blackboard. The elite displacement theory, more so in particular, what is a political entrepreneur? Do we talk about symbolic racism? So don't worry about symbolic racism, racial resentment, or the components of black public opinion. We never got around to talking about racism, symbolic racism, racial resentment, and the 4 components of black public opinion. Those 3 items will not be on the midterm. We were supposed to be a bit further than we are. So don't worry about that. But you do need to have a understanding of black political ideologies. That will be on the midterm. And so what does the midterm look like? I can walk us through it. So, of course, yes, this is the midterm. You won't be able to pause it and see what that was. Nope, I'm smarter than that. So there will be 10 multiple choice questions, 5 matching questions, and then 8 short answer questions. And then there are 2 extra credit questions. So 10 multiple choice, those are worth 4 points each. Then there are 10 matching. Those are also worth 2 points each, not 10. 5 questions worth 10 points. And then we have our short answer section. So I will read out a couple of these short answer questions. So let us see. What is linked fate? What is the black utility heuristic? How is linked fate seen in the use of the black utility heuristic? Even if this is the first time you've taken a class with me, y'all should know. Like, linked fate, linked fate, linked fate. That's like all I talk about. You should know what that is. And if not, it's in your notes. It's in the notes, and it's in Walton and Hayes, and it's also in Black Visions. Linked fate. Anyways, describe Harris's alternative formulation. Let's see. What is a political entrepreneur? What is the elite displacement theory? I'll probably have to cross out what is symbolic racism, as well as the difference between equality and equity. What is black conservatism? Why is black conservatism the most marginalized ideology amongst black people? Let's see. President Eisenhower was a Republican president from 1953 until 61. During World War II, he was also a 5-star general. Eisenhower's main goals in office were to keep pressure on the Soviet Union and reduce federal deficits. During his presidency, he threatened the use of nuclear weapons in effort to conclude the Korean War. It goes on to describe other aspects of Eisenhower's presidency, and then based on all that information, I want you to typify his administration according to Walton and Smith's typology of racial attitudes and policy perspectives of American presidents. So you remember that whole activity we did talking about, well, trying to categorize the administrations of every single president, and all y'all said all the presidents were racist except like JFK and Jimmy Carter. Yeah, you're going to do that again for an actual president, and that would be Eisenhower. And then for question 1, I give you the description of a fictionalized black candidate. I mean, because originally it was going to be Andrew Gillum, but then, Andrew Gillum was messy. I don't know if y'all heard, that was like, that wasn't last week before last, where he was found during a police bus, like high on meth and drunk and in a hotel room with a gigolo naked. It was a lot. So yeah, there's no more cool Andrew Gillum on that. But so I had to take his name out and create a fictionalized young black politician. I give you aspects about his life, his leadership style, etc. And then you have to categorize him according to Gillespie's typology of phase 3 leaders. And then beyond that, that's the exam. So you'll have 3 days. Once you start the exam, you have a 12-hour window. Don't worry about symbolic racism, racial resentment, or the 4 components of black public opinion. That's all I got for everybody. Are there any questions? How is everybody feeling out there? Y'all good? Y'all go outside if you can. Take naps. If you have any questions related to the exam, would it be useful? I do have other slides pulled up. Would you want me to run through them real quick? Let a person know. I don't know. Somebody should be typing. Will anybody type? That'd be nice. So yeah, we have 7 watching.